the host at MSI. We are an organization that's part of Challenge America, and I just posted a link to our organization so you can learn more. And I am in the mountains of Colorado, so it's 3 o'clock for me. And I hope that I'm just praying for good internet connection today. And I'm just going to turn it over to Heather Penney and Sharisa Jackson, and I'll have Sharisa, you can just introduce Heather. And we're so limited on time that I just want you to be able to get started. Okay. And to everyone here, you can mute your video. You can come in on video if you want to, but just so you know that your name and image might show up in our recordings that we're going to post for other people to view afterwards. So just be aware of that. And I'm going to come back in towards the end of the hour and help with questions that come up. And if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button that says chat, and that's where you can add your questions. Okay, and we'll get to those questions at the end. Okay, everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for coming to Who's at the Table. I'm so excited to have Miss Heather Penney here today with us to tell us about her story and why she deserves to be here at the table. I'm Sharisa Jackson. I'm the Chief Medical Executive of AMVETS. And I thought of this idea because it's so important, particularly what's going on in the community now, that women veterans know that they deserve to be at the table. They deserve to be in those boardroom discussions, and with what our journeys have been and what we have learned, we deserve to be there making those big money decisions. And so with that being said, the idea is to bring some powerful women veterans to the table. And as you guys saw, the last 2 episodes, we had Portia Williams, we had Erin Cobb, and today we have none other than Ms. Heather Penney. And so I don't want to do her any injustice by not having a good introduction. So I want her to introduce herself. So Ms. Heather, I want you to introduce yourself and tell the women veterans who you are and what you're all about and why you deserve to be here at the table.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say it is so meaningful for me to be here because part of my purpose and the reason why I want to be at the table is to empower others. And so the opportunity to be able to talk with you, Sharisa, and engage with your audience, in my mind, is all about empowering others and providing others the tools so that they can come to the table and bring their unique gifts, because we are all better together. And if we're not at the table, if we're not bringing our whole selves, our best selves, then we're all suffering. We're not as good as we can be.
Absolutely. I think that's important, particularly for women veterans to hear, because we all know that a lot of women veterans don't even consider themselves veterans because they either did not deploy, they feel as though, you know, I'm not a male. So to hear you and hear other powerful women tell their stories, I think that does inspire other women to do that. So thank you so much for that. So I read your bio and I know you're like me, Air Force. Why did you decide to come into the Air Force?
Because I love jets. I love aviation. I love flight. My daddy was a fighter pilot, and he was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. When I was a young girl, I forget what I was looking for in the garage. I was rummaging around the garage, but I stumbled upon a shoebox full of some cassettes. And so I took them back to my room with, you know, the walls covered with like butterflies, my stuffed animals. And I took a cassette out of the tape and I popped it in my little tape player and I closed the lid and I hit play, you know, chunk, for those of us that still remember those technologies. And they were tapes from his missions in Vietnam. He had recorded the audio from the radio of his A-7 as he flew bombing missions over Hanoi, as he conducted search and rescue missions to find and bring in the Jolly Green helicopters to rescue downed pilots. And although it took me years and iterations, I wore those tapes out to learn how, the radix. It was a foreign language, and I mean, they were pretty cruddy tapes, right? You know, with they were scratchy and the audio wasn't great, and I mean, the guys are talking in code. But I finally began to realize and figure out that these were stories, and what these men did mattered, and they were in it together, and they were doing the best they could for what our nation had asked of them. And later on, when he began to bring his fighter squadron buddies to the house for, you know, dinners, and I'd listen to them tell their stories in the back patio, and I'd sneak off into a corner to listen to them. I knew that there was nothing more that I wanted to do than to fly fighters and be in that kind of brotherhood. And it meant so much to me to think about what they were doing and the bond and the connection that they had, and that they were doing it for our nation. And I think that that's something that is unique about us as veterans, is that we have recognized that there are things in this world that are more important than ourselves, that are bigger than ourselves. And that's why we've raised our right hand to swear that oath to protect and defend. And inherent in that oath is recognizing that while our lives have, you know, they have value, they matter, there are things that matter more. Mm-hmm. And that through our service, we can make this world a better place. Mm-hmm. And that's what brought me to that path. You know, what's interesting though is when I showed up to college, you know, I intended on going through ROTC. My mama, wonderful. She's like, you can be anything you want to be. Just work hard, eat your vegetables, do your homework. She never told me that I couldn't be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
And women were not allowed to be in fighters. So it wasn't until I was in graduate school that Congress opened up combat aviation to women. And that's when I applied to join the Air National Guard, and fortunately was selected by the DC Air National Guard to go fly F-16s. And that was where my path into the military began. But I mean, I'm proud to be able to say, like many other veterans, that I have a history and a legacy of service in my family. I'm proud of that, and I only hope that not only can we begin to expand the numbers through our own children, but expand the numbers in our own population of those who understand what it means to serve our nation. And it doesn't just mean service in terms of the military, mm-hmm. although obviously we all think is unique about the kind of service that we have, and the families, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, what that means. But that service to our nation is so much more than just the military. I think every citizen has the opportunity to serve, and that's about making our communities a better place, our cities a better place, our businesses better places, our nation a better place. We all have that opportunity to have a leadership impact. And so that's why being at the table matters. We talk about the table figuratively like the C-suite, and yes, that matters, mm-hmm. but we can all take our place at the table even when we're not at the C-suite, because taking a place at the table is fundamentally about leadership. Mm-hmm. And we can embody that leadership, whether or not it's in our churches, whether or not it's in you know, our philanthropic or volunteer activities, whether or not we're taking leadership and setting the tone and setting the environment for what we're doing within our businesses or our neighborhoods and our communities. We all can make the table where we're at. We just have to take the opportunity to be those leaders that we are, and that the military has trained us to be.
Absolutely. And you probably don't know this about me, but my very first duty station in the Air Force after becoming a logistics officer was being stationed at Langley Air Force Base. And so I got to actually order parts for F-15s and F-16s. And so I was so excited to see the women pilots come through with your little jumpers on. And I just thought you guys were just so awesome and so cool when you came through the flight line, and you came through those big hangars, and you will see the tall guys, and then you see the women that were just a little bit shorter, but you guys were all
a lot shorter.
Yeah, you guys were all walk out to the flight line. And I would always think, man, how powerful do they feel to know that they're side by side with a guy that's a pilot, and to know that you're one of them. And to know that I was there, you know, providing the mechanics and the parts to make sure you guys went up into the air safely for those 5 years that I was there was totally incredible. But I just thought it was awesome just seeing the women come through that hangar, and you guys were just beautiful and, you know, professional, and you guys just epitomized for me, you know, what a woman veteran should be and look like in the military. So thank you so much for that. But that was the first image I had, was at my very first duty station. So I'm not sure if you ever read Langley or not, but when I read your story, I'm like, I'm gonna have to tell her that that was my first job, is providing those parts for the F-15s, F-16. I was too short to be a pilot. I'm only 5'4.5", so that was not going to happen. That was certainly not going to happen. So, well, go ahead.
I was going to say there's something though that I want to tease out a little bit in what you said there, is that, you know, we must have been so powerful walking out there, you know, knowing that we were, you know, like these guys, and that was perhaps how some of us felt at first, because, you know, we had fought so hard and worked so hard to earn our place to be with the guys. But in reality, our power came from ourselves. Our power came from our training. Our power came from our own personal commitment to be excellent at everything that we did. It wasn't that we were part of the boys club. It was that we had earned our place because of our competencies and because of our skill sets. And I think that that's a really important distinction, because otherwise we give power outside of ourselves. We give that power to the bros, and if they accept us, then we can be powerful. But if they don't accept us, if we're not quite right, then you know, we're still constantly seeking that kind of approval, and that's giving our power away. So I think that distinction is really important, because what made us capable, confident, and really powerful was the level of skill that we had achieved as a result of our commitment, that daily commitment and discipline to do the hard work, to do the boring work, to do you know, the personal growth that's necessary to confront our failures and own them and improve because of them, so that, you know, we could lay down and really execute based off of our own tactical proficiency. And so I think that's an important distinction, to not let others have the power of choosing whether or not we get to belong, that because of our own commitment to the mission, that purpose, and that cultivation of competency, that we can own our place without other people's approval or having to even like us. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is that, you know, in the military, that camaraderie and esprit de corps and that sense of being a team, man, that is part of what we thrive on. That's what makes us so effective.
Yeah.
We also have to have the courage to be able to take a leadership position, even when you know, that might not necessarily be the popular position, especially when it might not, especially when it isn't the popular position. A lot of people say integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking. I would say the harder kind of integrity is to do the right thing when everyone is looking.
Absolutely.
Sometimes doing the right thing isn't popular.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I want to get into now is the 9/11, what happened on 9/11 and what happened that day, right? And I had not known about you until, I think it was the event, Women's Veterans Rock had an event, and you was one of the panelists last year. And you were in the booklet, and I read the booklet. I'm like, oh my God, where is Heather? I have to talk to her. I have to hear this story for myself. I have to understand what she was feeling, what she was experiencing on that day. So, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers here want to hear, because for me, that day, I still remember where I was, what happened, you know, where my kids was, what I was thinking about, watching it on the news. And I'm sure for you, that was different. It was probably different for everybody, but I want to hear that story. What happened on that day and how did you get involved on that day?
Well, as you mentioned, Teresa, 9/11 is a day that we all know, that we all remember exactly what we were doing. And we also remember exactly when our world changed, which is interesting because if you think about it, if you had not seen the video of the towers, if you'd not seen them collapse, seen the airliners fly into the Pentagon and the towers, you were living in a pre-9/11 world. You know, you had to see the footage to have stepped into that post-9/11 world. And so I was a young, brand new wingman in my fighter squadron. We'd just gotten back from Red Flag. It was my first Red Flag. I had only become combat mission ready qualified probably 6 months before. So I still, you know, fairly new and proving myself. And since we just gotten back from Red Flag, the squadron was a total skeleton crew. I mean, guys were on leave. They, you know, it was a guard unit. They'd gone back to the airlines. They were taking time to be with their families. And so I was there with the skeleton crew doing, you know, the basic queep of running a fighter squadron, going through a scheduling meeting, talking about the upcoming week and so forth. When one of our enlisted troops knocked on the door and said an aircraft crashed into a plane crashed in the World Trade Center. And we made the assumption that it was like a small general aviation aircraft. Everyone knows those can't actually hurt anything. They like bounce off of buildings. That, you know, it's the pedestrians below that's the problem for. So we made it, you know, probably, you know, retrospectively some tasteless, but, you know, sort of black humor type comments, and just went back to work because it didn't occur to us that it would be so different. And it wasn't until he came back after the second World Trade Center was hit and said it was on purpose that we got up and we saw the video as well. Now you have to remember, I was just a wingman, right? My essay and leadership really low.
You're the bottom one on the totem pole, huh?
Yes, I was totally on the bottom of the totem pole, you know. But doing what we could do to try to get airborne. Mark Sasseville was our director of operations at the time. He's now the deputy chief for the National Guard Bureau, 3-star general. He's wonderful to see his leadership has been recognized and appropriately utilized. He knew we needed to get airborne. So did our weapons officer, Dan Raisin Kane, who also now is a general officer. And he, you know, had the foresight to realize that we needed to get weapons on our aircraft, because a lot of people, they don't really realize, they don't think that, you know, when we go out to train, we don't carry real weapons. And we rarely carry anything that we can actually drop from, you know, or fire or anything. I mean, like that requires special ranges to drop weapons. And normally if we're going to go practice that, you know, it's still only a 33-pound practice bomb. It's not an actual explosive. And for our missiles, you know, certainly those never leave the rails. It's just the electronics. There's no rocket body. I mean, there's no rocket fuel. So it's all training duds is what we carry. But Raisin knew he knew that the world had changed. We needed to get weapons on the aircraft. And so he called down on his own volition, you know, obviously coordinating with the leadership that we had there. Mark Sasseville, our DO, and then our wing commander had come down from the wing building as well. And so he calls down to the bomb dump and he instructs them to begin building bombs, which again, Teresa, you know, because you've been in logistics, but we also don't store bombs and rockets and stuff all built up. I mean, you keep all all the components separate, and then you build it up when the air tasking order comes down. And basically it's like a menu. I want these kinds of weapons with these diffuses and so forth. So Raisin calls down and says, I need you to start building me some AIM-9s and I need you to do it now. Which, if you can imagine, you know, being that troop down there in the bomb dump, which by the way is like way off behind the golf course and past the camping, and you know, as far as you can get it. Yeah. And this major calls you up and says, you know, I need you to build me some live weapons. I mean, we're in good guy land. What is going on? So it really is a testament to Raisin's leadership and the relationship and the credibility that he had with those troops, that they trusted him. And they took the risk to begin building these weapons up. And that Raisin and our leadership in that chain had the willingness to take the risk of building this, because we didn't have the authorization. Mm-hmm. We didn't have an air tasking order. And the challenge was, is as the National Guard, we weren't on anybody's radar. As you'll recall, in the 1990s, after the Soviet Union fell, I mean, the nation cut the Air Force in half. Mm-hmm. And all of our alert units, which used to ring the country and staring out to protect us from Soviet bombers, there were only 5 units across the entire United States. There was Portland, Fresno, Homestead, the Det there at Langley, and then up at Otis in New York. Those were the only units that were sitting alert. So we at DC had once sat alert a long time ago, but that had been knocked off. So we weren't in any kind of air defense organizational chain of command. As a National Guard unit, I mean, the active duty Air Force didn't, they had no authorization over us. Mm-hmm. And what made it even more challenging was, as the DC National Guard, we had no governor. Mm-hmm. Our line of authority doesn't go to the mayor of DC. It actually goes straight to the president of the United States. So you can imagine President Bush was pretty busy that day. Mm-hmm. And he normally delegates that to the Secretary of the Army, who doesn't think about air assets. Mm-hmm. So getting the actual authorization to launch took so much longer than it should have. And it wasn't until after the Pentagon was hit that President Cheney said, "Aren't there fighters at Andrews? Get them airborne." And that's when SAS looked at me and said, "All right, Lucky, you're with me. Raisin, you and Igor, wait until you get missiles. Let's go." Mm. But SAS and I didn't have any missiles. We didn't have any weapons on the aircraft. We had duds. And so as we were running out to the jet, we believed that there were 3 unaccounted for airliners. And we had information from Potomac Air Traffic Control that they believed that one of the airliners that had gone low, that lost radar contact with, was coming down the Potomac out of Pennsylvania. Mm. And because they had that vector, they wanted us to take off and then head out to the northwest to begin looking for that airliner. Mm. We now know was Flight 93. Mm-hmm. And so SAS and I were a mission failure because we never got off the ground in time. We never found the aircraft. And importantly, because the passengers on Flight 93 were the true heroes.
Mm-hmm. And so knowing all that, and as you went home the next day, how did you feel knowing that you weren't able to perform, or you weren't able to be a part of, the mission? How did you feel leaving that situation?
Well, as we were standing at the ops desk waiting for the authorization to launch, I mean, I had the distinct desire, pick me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I know that's what Igor was thinking, and so we all were eager to go because we all felt the need to serve, and that's something that's universal across all of us as veterans, is the need and the desire to serve. Mm-hmm. Even when if you're successful, it would be a one-way mission. Mm-hmm. All step up to the plate. And that, to me, is what's truly inspiring as I reflect upon that day, is that there was nothing special or unique about me or what I was willing to do. If SAS and I had been successful, he would have rammed his aircraft into the cockpit of the airliner, and I would have rammed my jet into the tail of the airliner. Of course, we didn't have to do that. But even knowing that it was a suicide mission, knowing that we were protecting our capital, is something that I think everyone in our nation would have been willing to do. And I can say that with confidence because the passengers on Flight 93 did.
Yeah.
And they were just average, ordinary Americans.
Yeah.
Right? And for them, when they boarded that airliner, they were just going on vacation, coming home from a business trip, going to see grandma. There was nothing unusual about that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they had not, like we all have, they had not raised their hand and sworn an oath to protect and defend,
Mm-hmm.
but they did. And so when I think about the greatest generation of World War II, who were losing those veterans at such a rapid pace now, 75 years ago. I mean, we've just passed victory in Europe, and we're approaching victory in Japan in terms of those theaters of World War II. And so as we pause and we think about the sacrifices and everything that generation did to assure the freedom of the world, what I realize is that the passengers on Flight 93 have a very direct lineage, because what made the greatest generation great was that they were actually totally ordinary, because they're everyday Americans,
Mm-hmm.
just doing what their nation had called upon them to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And today, while we're less than 1% in terms of the veteran population, because we have stepped forward before our nation has asked. What we need to do is recognize that service is resident in all Americans. What we need to do is learn, how do we tap that sense of duty? How do we tap that sense of service? How do we tap that obligation to our nation and the ideals of our nation, which are greater than us? How do we activate that in our daily lives, in our daily actions, our daily thoughts, the words we use, the things we do, and the organizations and communities that we lead?
Yeah. But when I think about your day, I think about the times I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and particularly in Iraq, when we were selected to actually take care of the insurgents. We had units besides the American ward, besides the wards for kids. We had a ward just for the insurgents. These were the guys that have shot at us. These were the guys that had killed some of our soldiers. And now we as nurses had to take care of them. And so when it was time to make that assignment to say who was going to that ward, I felt that sense of anxiety and that sense of frustration, be like, now I have to still serve as a soldier, but also as a nurse to the enemy. And I was trying to kind of sense from you that anxiety that I walked onto that floor, gave that blood to that enemy that fired at us, gave those vitals, gave food to the enemy that was spitting at us when we were taking care of them. Did you have that bottled up anxiety, frustration, anxiousness when you were waiting to be told to go or not to go? And then when you didn't go, how did you feel?
Well, of course, I was so anxious to be able to get off the ground and do something to protect. I mean, that's what we were supposed to do. And so it was like I had given this oath, and now we were failing. Mm-hmm. And when the Pentagon was hit, it was a kick in the gut. Mm. The thing is that we can look back now at 9/11 and we can know sort of that perfect hindsight of how the timeline occurred. Yep. But at the time, we thought there were 3 airliners, but we went as far as we could. And then SAS called Branch House for us to come back, because he was concerned that if we had picked a slightly wrong direction, we could have been outflanked by the airliner, right? Yep. Mm-hmm. So we had to go back, and then once we had sanitized that airspace, we needed to go back and set up a combat air patrol, and then Raisin and Igor got airborne, and so we were working with Potomac Air Control. We were sanitizing. Once we got airborne, the relief, sort of okay, we at least haven't lost this round.
Yeah.
we can continue to sanitize, we can continue to protect, and we can execute our mission now. We can keep people safe now. But that heightened awareness, that heightened anxiety of not knowing, you know, what was coming down in the battle space. We were very fortunate, though, that that First Air Force came in, and we ended up getting Langley Vipers overhead at 18,000. They brought an AWACS with them. They brought a tanker with them. Yay!
Yeah.
So that was all good. And then after SAS and I landed, we got weapons, we got airborne again. And then later that day, we escorted President Bush back into Andrews. But once we started those operations, once we had sanitized the airspace, and we didn't know that the airliner had crashed.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that, you know, there was so much fog, there was so much friction and uncertainty that all we had to do was go to the immediate threat axis and then come back and set up a rotating cap so that we could protect the nation, our capital. But that was the best that we could do, you know, just us in our 2 aircraft. I think so much of the frustration that I experienced was, you know, a decade later, because I didn't think about 9/11. I mean, I was just the wingman. I was not doing anything. I was not the flight lead. I was just doing what I could do to be the best wingman that I could be, and to do what my nation had asked. And, you know, we came back and continued to do the combat air patrols. And then as we got people that filtered in, and we got our pilots back onto the base, we were able to start filling the schedule and do 24/7 combat air patrols. And I flew combat air patrols for nearly a year before we started spinning up to go to Iraq. And then life just became part of the natural service rhythm of deployment and training and deployment and training and so forth. And so I didn't even think about 9/11 seriously until a decade later.
Yeah.
That's when I really began to process the frustration of what I perceive our mission failure to be.
And have you ever thought about if you hadn't failed that day and you did go up, right? And if you guys had discovered that other airliner and you had to perform, and it was that day that you had to do the mission, have you ever thought about what that would have been and where your life would be right now?
Well, I wouldn't be right now. We'd been successful. It was a suicide mission, remember? We had no weapons.
You're talking to me today, right? I mean, but that could have been possible, right? So have you ever thought, you know, in essence, you're here today because of that failure, but what if we needed you up there and you were able to get up there? Have you ever thought about that?
If we had been successful, if we were successful in the timing of our mission, if we'd been successful in finding Flight 93 before it went down, if we had given our lives, then, you know, as we were waiting, we knew that it was a suicide mission for the first folks out of the door. And I actually had total peace with that, because I realized that if God, if the universe had placed me in that position to be that person, then that was my purpose.
Wow.
That was what my country and my community, that was what God had asked me to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because we are people of service. I mean, when we wear that, it's not about us anymore. It's about protecting the country and being available and showing up to do what is necessary. And that's what's important. Heather, you're on mute. And so as we're waiting for Heather to, there she is.
Yeah, sorry, I was desperately trying to unmute myself and it wouldn't allow me.
No worries. No, I was just saying, we do what we have to do when we wear that uniform. And I was just recalling when I was in Afghanistan and we were bombed, my unit was bombed. And I said the same thing you said. If this is the time for me to go, that's what's in my plan. That's what God has for me at that time. But I was going to go down fighting for sure. So we do what we have to do when the time comes. And that's who we are when we wear the uniform, right? And so we're coming up really close here to us being able to take some questions. But before we do that, I want to know, who did you tell first that you was possibly going to have to do this mission? Did you tell your mom? Did you tell your dad? Did you call your friends up and like, look what I could have done today? Who did you call first or tell first after the situation?
Afterwards, gosh, I think it was probably at least a week or so before things calmed down enough. I think I told my neighbors who were very close friends, mm-hmm. and that was, to me, it wasn't a big deal.
Oh, okay. And I know just being on the flight line, you guys as pilots get nicknames and things of that nature. So where did Lucky come from?
You know that old saying, better lucky than good? Call sign. You don't get to choose your call sign. Otherwise, we'd all be named Maverick and Ice. Right. You typically get named once you earn your combat mission ready status. Until then, you just have a nickname. You have a very generic name. It's new guy. Yeah. And once you reach your combat mission ready status, you've been in the squadron long enough that guys get to know you, that they've seen you perform, they get to know your personality, and usually your call sign comes from one of two things. It's a play on your last name, like Mark Sasseville's call sign is Sass. Raisin's call sign, his last name is Kane, Raisin Kane, mm-hmm. And so my call sign is Lucky Penny. But other times it's either a witty little acronym. Like one of my favorites is another chick fighter pilot who I just adore, and she's so phenomenal. Her call sign is Shock for Scarlet-Headed Ovulating Commie Killer.
Okay.
Fabulous. I'm so jealous. It's such a fabulous name. Or it can be an act of buffoonery. So to tease you, this is one of the things that part of the fighter pilot culture is we are very rough and tumble with our humor with each other. And I think that's an important piece because it keeps us, we need to develop a thick skin, not only because the kind of the missions and combat that we do, bad things and tough things happen. But we also need to develop a thick skin because we need to be able to own our own mistakes and own our errors. And if we were too thin-skinned, if we were too defensive and we were unwilling to accept responsibility for our mistakes and our errors, we would never be able to improve. And so that kind of rough and tumble humor keeps us humble and reminds us there's always something we can do to better ourselves, to better our performance, to learn more, to continue to grow, to improve.
Okay, here's your rapid fire fill in the blank here. My life without the military would have been
small.
Small. Why small?
The military forced me to grow. It gave me so much opportunity. I never would have been able to fly the F-16, which there's not a day that goes by that I don't miss that jet. I never would have met the wonderful people that I adore and admire and have inspired me and pushed me to become my better self. I just truly believe that without the military, and the sense of purpose and service and the incredible camaraderie, my life would have just been so much smaller.
Okay. My biggest motivation or motivator is?
To empower others and make the world a better place.
And how would you do that?
That's one thing that I've found in a way that I've tried to use my experience on 9/11 is help others understand that, I often think that either bravery or courage or heroism is something that happens in the movies, or it's something that you're either born with, you know, it's something you are or you aren't, and we aren't. You know, it's something that is special, that only heroes have, that but it's not me. And what I realized about 9/11, and I hope the message that people take away is that heroism and bravery is something that we all have inside of us. We all have the potential and competency for that, because it's really about choices. It's about our daily choices. Heroism is about building the communities around us and being connected with the people in those communities. It's about service and recognizing that there are things in this world that are more important than ourselves, and finding how we can serve that purpose, serve our nation, serve our communities in ways that are bigger than us and are not fundamentally self-serving. And then finally, bringing bravery into that, where we're making the choice to overcome our fears and our insecurities so that we can serve our communities. And when you combine those together, that's what creates heroism. It's not always about these, you know, massive Hollywood movie star moments. It's about the daily choices that we make of how we live our lives, and exercising those habit patterns so that they're strong and that they're instinctual, and they're just become part of who we are. But it starts out with choice. It's about being aware and starting out with a choice to build communities, a choice to build a purpose and understand how to serve those communities, and to build our bravery muscle, you know, to overcome our fears and insecurities so that we can do the things that are bigger than us.
If you had a do-over in life, it would be?
Not marrying my ex-husband.
Don't we all?
Okay, next.
We can all relate to that. Check. Okay, the day I would never forget is?
Oh gosh, there's so many. There's so many, because I have to say that I'm so blessed with so many wonderful memories and so many joyful experiences and moments. And I mean, I think sort of the natural answer is the day I'll never forget is 9/11, because
That's why I wanted to give you that question, because I don't want you to say that.
Yeah, no, I really don't. It can be everything from small moments, like realizing the day I'll never forget is the moment that I realized that happiness was my own choice, and and healing was my own choice, and I no longer had to remain married to my ex. Mm-hmm. Like that's a pretty pivotal moment. Mm-hmm. It's as something as simple as precious moments like eating, you know, ice cream with my daughters. You know, we all have those funny parent failure moments. I've got those, which I won't share. Marrying my new husband, perfect, you know, and even just like perfect little moments, like when I was in pilot training, I had a little airplane. I call her my first love. She was my pumpkin. This little 1940 Taylorcraft. And I was just doing pattern work in the little airport where I kept her. And my best friend was doing pattern work in her little airplane. And the sun was going down, and it was just the golden September light, you know, that late summer golden light, as you know, and the wheat was just waving in the fields right outside, and it was just a moment of perfection, kind of the field of dreams type of feel. I mean, and so there's so many pieces like that, or you know, and even moments where I will never forget, because I can feel the burning, humiliating tears of having failed, mm-hmm. having tried something and not done it, yeah. You know, having failed and trying to overcome that, and not forgetting and not passing over those moments, because they charge me to force myself to be better and to try harder. Yeah. You know, and never to believe your own press, right?
Exactly. Okay, last question. I will last fill in the blank. The one constant thing in my life is?
My pursuit of growth.
And what does that look like?
It means constantly striving to be my best self, to learn more, to improve my skills, to be better for the people around me, but importantly, to be better for me, because I expect it from myself. You know, we've all been put here on this earth for a reason. And we may not necessarily know intuitively, you know, or yet what that reason is, but we have to constantly be cultivating who we should be, who our ideal of ourselves is, constantly reaching for that aspiration of who we need to be, because if we become complacent, when our time comes, we won't be ready. You know, we won't be what we need to be be able to meet that moment. And so the constant in my life is striving to become, to improve, to really, I mean, to continue to grow, to lift up people around me and to make the world around me a better place.
I love it. And so,
by the way, I don't always succeed at that. I have plenty of bad days. But that's what I'm trying for. You know, some days you're 100% way down here, and other days you're 100% way up here.
It's totally okay. We're all human.
It's the struggle. It's the struggle that matters. And we have to forgive ourselves and remember it's the struggle that matters, because that's where the growth actually comes from.
Yeah, we have to give ourselves permission to make mistakes and know that we're human and things are not going to be 100% every single day. It's just not. And I think for me, when I realized that, I stopped trying to reach for perfection and have every day be on a regimented, scheduled situation. I think that's when I felt like I was finally living. It took the pressure off. It took the insanity of what I was living, you know, off of me, because I allowed myself to then say, you're not perfect and you're going to make mistakes, and we grow from our mistakes. At least you should be growing from your mistakes. And that's the important thing. So that was a really, really good response there. So for all of the audience, if you guys have questions, please put those questions in the chat box. And as we're waiting for those questions, I know, Heather, you and I talked when we were prepping for the call today that, you know, we know the state of what the world is in right now, particularly when it comes to Black Lives Matter. We know we've been quarantined for so long, since March. We know that mental health is surely an issue for a lot of us who are not used to these types of conditions, particularly veterans who are probably suffering from post-traumatic stress. And then to see the riots and the protests, there's a lot going on. And you said something really profound the other day, and I would love for that to be your closing inspirational message until some more questions come up. And so the question that I had asked you was, what would you say to anybody on the streets, to these women veterans, to the visitors here in the forum, about how they should, you know, view the world, even though it's kind of chaotic right now?
Oh gosh, you're putting me on the spot now because I can't remember what I said. Can you give me a prompt?
Oh my God, I wish I could, because it was so good. I'm like, I know she remembered. It was something very poetic. It was something you were saying that you and your friend were talking, and you were just throwing out almost like scriptures. And I was just like, whoa, that's good. You was giving us the really good nuggets. Even Heather Russell was like, man, that was good. That was good. And now you can't remember, Heather P?
No, I'm sorry. You're asking for a replay. You know, so I mean, like, as we go forward, I think that the important thing to remember is that you know, as I said in the beginning, is that we all need each other.
Yeah.
And as we recall, you know, when we, as veterans, we raised our right hand and swore that oath. We swore to protect and defend, and that meant everybody.
Yeah.
It didn't just mean one single group. It meant everybody. And to continue to turn away from the injustices that have occurred is just the same as enabling fratricide against our blue forces. We owe it to our communities to stand up for what is righteous. And that means, you know, the justice and fair and equal treatment of everyone within our communities, and the fair and equal treatment of opportunity as well. Mm-hmm. Opportunity is required. And this is a piece where that bravery and that heroism, that community can come together, because silence is tolerance. Tolerance is acceptance. Acceptance becomes the standard, and the standard becomes institutionalized. So when we are silent, when we tolerate, when we turn away from something that we know is unjust, that we know is not right, what we're doing is we're allowing that to be just another brick in the institution of injustice. And so it is everyone's obligation to, just as we would not allow harm to come to our comrades, our veterans, our brothers and sisters in arms, it is our obligation to speak up about injustice everywhere that we see that. Mm-hmm. For the fair and equal treatment and opportunity for everyone within our communities and our nation.
Yeah.
I think that is an important piece for, I understand that it is part of what has been really important for me here is to continue to learn and to listen. Mm-hmm. and to validate, the experiences of Black Americans. Because, and I'll give you a small example of how a lot of people really struggle with institutional bias and kind of what is that? And it's something as simple as, for example, you mentioned you were too short to be a fighter, to go into aviation, to go into military aviation. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an example of institutional bias because the cockpits had been built for big people, men. And the percentage of short men is actually pretty small. So, it was pretty negligible. That's an example of where it wasn't necessarily deliberate, but it was institutionalized. And I think that's an important difference or important distinction. Or, because, men had always been pilots. And so when women started becoming pilots, the cockpit structures didn't really change. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that it was malicious or nefarious. It was just institutionalized. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Same example with flight suits. Mm-hmm. Or, the flight suits that women wear, I'll tell you what, the zipper doesn't quite work.
Yep.
To be able to use the bathroom in the cockpit.
In the onesies.
So, and again, those were just standard issue flight suits.
Yeah.
If you've been over to bad guy land, the armored gear that you got was a small.
Yep.
It was a man small. So it was way too big to actually do anything to protect you. And that was nefarious. It wasn't malicious. It was just institutionalized bias. It was a blind spot. And see, here's the thing too, is that I discovered that I think is actually a really important perspective that we as veterans can share, is that as the only female in my fighter squadron, there was tons of sort of institutionalized cultural bias and so forth. Lots of the 1,000 cuts kinds of things. But my bros were super good dudes. They supported me. They respected me. They cared about me. They were just blind to how things that had become normalized within the culture, they were blind to how those things had impacted me. There was no malicious intent. They just didn't see it.
So how do we change that in the world?
Well, I think that this is an important moment because people are now willing to listen. They're now willing to see. And that's what we need to capitalize and avoid turning this into an us versus them. The minute we create the other is the moment that we begin to shut down compassion, shut down empathy, and shut down listening. We have to understand that it's not necessary. I mean, there are bad guys. I mean, there were jerks in my squadron who didn't want me there just simply because I'm a girl, right? Okay, so we know that. Let's not talk about that piece. Because the majority of my bros were good dudes. If I had turned it into a her versus him, if I turned it into an us versus them, an other type of dynamic, if I had polarized it that way, then they never would have been willing to look at things differently. And so we're at a unique moment in time where I think as a white majority, we're willing to listen, to have compassion, to understand and learn what we have been blind to, the same way my bros had been, and learn what institutional bias is, just like cockpit sizing and, flight suits and body armor, right? Mm-hmm. And when we begin to identify what those things that are institutional, how we can change those, and then also understand what things are cultural and how we can begin to shift our language, shift our relations in a way that's healthy for everyone, then that's when I think, well, things will finally occur. But I certainly, I don't want to see us become polarized. I'm so worried about that, because this is a moment where we should be coming together.
Yeah. And, you know, for someone like myself, I grew up in a white neighborhood. I was the only Black family in the neighborhood. And so I grew up knowing that there was biases, and I grew up knowing that there was racism and things of that nature. And so we were always taught we had to be better. We had to be better than that. We had to be exceptional students. We had to be good girls, not get in trouble, because we knew the surrounding that we had, because being in the deep, deep South of South Carolina, surrounded by the white neighbors, we knew we had to be better than them. And so my parents ingrained that in us a lot. And as a result, you know, I have 5 siblings, and not all of us have the same ideas. And even within my own family, there are certain things that are said, certain things that are done. I'm just like, you're not helping the situation. Why say the things that you say? Why divide us? Why does it have to be a them? Why can't we be one? And I fear that if the world doesn't see that as all of us being one, without color, without biases, without racism, I think we're doomed. And it's so unfortunate, because we have a new generation that's coming up, and they're looking to see what we're doing, what we're saying, so that they can hopefully change the way things are in the world right now. And so I'm very concerned about my nephews. I have 2 of them, and I have a brother, and I have, you know, a lot of male friends that are African Americans. And so I worry about them if this world does not see a we, and they see they see we're this, we're that. And that's just unfortunate. And I hope for the world, I hope for this community that we can get to that point. So I appreciate your sentiments there, Heather P. I think we're almost out of time here. We got 1 more minute. Is there any last minute things you want to say to this audience before we close at Who's at the Table?
Well, I think that what you brought up, Sharisa, about, you know, about your experiences, you know, like you, being a woman, I really, in a fighter squadron, the only girl in my fighter squadron, I felt like I had to do better and be better and try harder. And while at the time, I mean, it felt unjust. At the same time, I look back on that, and I recognized that it wasn't fair, but at the same time, it was in accordance with my values to achieve. Mm-hmm. I'm a little conflicted about that because of the grading standard, if you will. But internally, for myself, I go, you know what? I was already achievement oriented and excellence oriented, and that just spurred me to be better than I might otherwise have been. And so I'm not sure that in terms of my own reflections on my experience, but you know, that I think trying to be our best and better sometimes, you know, than we think we can be, I think that's something we'll never regret. Yeah. Trying to be our best and trying to push ourselves as hard as we can. But the thing that you said about your nephews and your brothers and so forth, this is where we need to build connection. And group cohesion, you know, that's an important place, because it gives us a sense of belonging. As humans, we need to belong. And I think what's important for us right now is to begin defining what does it mean to be American and what our values are of being American, so that we can all share those same values and come together under those same values. I talk a lot about a mission purposed culture, because, you know, when we decide as a group that here are the standards that allow us to achieve our mission, to accomplish our purpose, and we can really focus our group norms, codes, and behaviors around that purpose, then that creates an opening and a space for people to be different in all sorts of wonderful ways. Yeah. But still come together as a group with tight cohesion and trust and esprit de corps and belonging, because together we know that we are coming together for this purpose, for this mission, and we share these values, codes, norms, and behaviors. And so it's a challenge, I think, because America is so diverse and so different. And we want to and we need to create space for a lot of that diversity because that's part of the joy of who we are as Americans. Mm-hmm. But part of this conversation is also, what are our shared values as Americans and what does that mean to be American? And that's part of the conversation and the dialogue and the debate, which is very messy right now, but very essential that we need to have. And I think it comes down to that all Americans are made equal. And while I understand the historical context, that's not what it meant, but that's what we mean today.
Absolutely.
And demand today.
Absolutely. So before we go, is there some place that the viewers can follow you? Is there a Instagram, Facebook handle? Are you at an event? Do you have a book? You know, push it out there. You know, tell the world what you got out there.
Okay, so I'm such a Luddite. Like, you know, most people from the military are like, stay off of social media. So just getting out of social media. So I don't know my handles right off the I am on Instagram. I am on Facebook. I am on LinkedIn. You can probably find me on LinkedIn, easiest there. I'm in the process of trying to update all that. Actually, one of the things that I've done is I've been so passionate about bringing veteran stories to the table that I co-founded a company called Athena's Voice. And so you can find us at athenasvoiceusa.com. And what we're trying to do there is share the wisdom of women warriors.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that is outstanding. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of women veterans reaching out to you. So thank you all for being here today at Who's at the Table. I would like to announce that the next veteran that's going to be on the show is none other than Ms. Robin Fortner. You will certainly be seeing that flyer go out probably in the next week or so, but she will be our next guest. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Heather Penney, for being on the show today. You were amazing, outstanding, inspirational, just like I thought I knew you would be. And I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure, and my best wishes to everyone.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Heather and Sharisa. And I'm sorry, there's a couple questions we didn't get to, but to those of you that asked those, I'll get the answers for you. I think we all agreed that we wanted to end on the note that we did. So I think that was perfect, and we'll get some of those resources for you. So thank you everyone for being here. Please check out Challenge America and Military Sisterhood Initiative. We have the links in the chat, and we're going to repost the video. So I think we'll have a lot more people that will be able to see it. And I really appreciate you both being here. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Be safe out there. Bye.
Thank you.